Okay. Well, I have been wanting to do some of these on the some of the set poetic forms that we've inherited. Um, Most of them don't get used very much by poets today, or since World War I, let's say. But on occasion they still do use them. I think I'm going to do one on the sonnet at some point. The sestina is a very nice form. I could see doing something with, and then Um, I don't know. I wouldn't rule out a haiku. I don't know. But anyway, we'll see. But today I want to look at the villanelle. It's a really pleasant form. There are some really wonderful examples of villanelles. Apart from the poem we're going to look at today, there are two nice ones by Mark Strand in his book Blizzard of One. Each one is inspired by a different De Chirico painting. He follows the form very strictly. Um, and then there's one um, by Theodore Rutke, and I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a very nice. I'm blanking on the name of it. Um, and Elizabeth Bishop has a great poem called One Art that where she takes some liberties with the strict form, but it's still recognizably a villanelle, and it's just a very nice form. So I'll get into what its features are after I read the poem. The one that I'm going to read today is by Dylan Thomas. It's one of his best known poems, if not his best known poem. It's certainly one of the best known lines he ever wrote. Do not go gentle into that good night. I usually stay clear of the really popular, the better known ones. I'm kind of a deep cuts guy, but I did want to do this poem, and I did, as I say, want to look at a villanelle. So this is a good excuse for doing that. Okay, do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Okay, so you probably noticed some repeated lines in that poem, and that's the distinguishing, the particular way they're repeated is the distinguishing feature of a villanelle. Um, the strict form of a villanelle is 19 lines, 5 tercets for 15 lines, and a quatrain, which makes up 19. And as I say, the really distinguishing characteristic of a villanelle is that the first and third lines of the first tercet alternate as the last lines of the remaining 4 tercets, and then they come together in the concluding quatrain to make the last 2 lines of the poem. So the first line of the first tercet is the last line of the second tercet and the last line of the fourth tercet. The third line of the first tercet is the last line of the third and fifth tercets. And then, as I say, they come together at the end. So um, you have these lines that keep coming back, and the um, what can be really powerful about a villanelle, about a good one like this one, um, is that as these lines keep coming back, as they recur, um, the more that you have read into the poem, and the more that you're seeing what he's showing you and describing to you, and you're absorbing the ideas and whatnot in the human situations, whatever it may be. When the lines return, they of course they acquire dimension and force and point and feeling and so forth as you continue to read. So I mean, similarly to when if you think of a song, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Say that the song is telling a story, or it's taking you through some, a succession of thoughts a person has, whatever it may be. But it may be telling an actual story, and the more of that you absorb, um, the chorus is going to seem different, even though it uses the exact same word. It's going to seem different. It's going to be have a larger scope of reference. Um, it's going to have a more inclusive structure of feeling, perhaps. It alters and expands in its in what it signifies, in what's what kind of state of mind it might be able to create for you, a state of feeling, etc. Um, so it's saying different things to you upon the fourth repetition than it did um, from those that it what it told you when you heard it the first time. So um, that's that kind of dynamic, that kind of process is going on with the villanelle. Um, the other thing about a villanelle is that typically traditionally they're written in iambic pentameter. And this poem by Thomas is definitely written in pentameter. There are 10 syllables. The pent, meaning five, refers to the five poetic feet that compose it, 2 syllables each. Um, and the best known poetic foot is, of course, the iamb, because most people at some point in high school read Shakespeare and confronted iambic pentameter. And if you, um, for example, if you Shakespearean sonnet that's in iambic pentameter, if you were to recite it and adhere to the stresses, to the accentual rhythm of five iambs, and like say the first line of one of the sonnets goes, "My love is as a fever longing still." If you said that in iambs, an iamb is I should say is a 2 syllable unit where the second syllable is stressed. Should have said that a minute ago. Anyway, so if you said that line of iambic pentameter and you accented it as as you should if they're all iambs, you would say, "My love is as a fever longing still," and that's kind of an artificial way of saying it. I made it more artificial by really exaggerating the stresses, perhaps, but still, it is an artificial way of saying it, which isn't bad. It's artifice is part of art, but I think today, even with Shakespeare, I think you would not really pronounce. I think a professional Shakespearean actor who was up on a stage reciting a sonnet would not say it that way. He would say something more like, "My love is as a fever, longing still for that which longer nurseth the disease." That's the first 2 lines. But my love is as a fever. My love. So you have an I am at the beginning, my love, and then I don't think you have another stress until the first syllable of fever is as a fever. So you've got a purus in there, which is 2 unstressed syllables, then another I am. But you'd have something more complicated than 5 IMs. In the Dylan Thomas poem, it is each line is 10 syllables, and uh, you do have. But I think you would get something more. So I think if you read the first line, if you read it as IMs, do not go gentle into that good night. I think we would be more inclined to say it something like, do not go gentle into that good night. So instead of 5 IMs, you would have 2 IMs. Do not go gentle, the first syllable of gentle. Uh, and then the last syllable of gentle and of into form would be appear as 2 unstressed syllables. And then to that is another IM, to that. Good night. Now, that's 2 stressed syllables, and that's called a spondee. So, um, and then rage, rage against the dying of the light. I think you would go rage, rage against the dying of the light. So you'd start with a spondee, 2 stressed syllables, rage, rage, uh, and then you'd have a pyrrhus, an iam, another pyrrhus, and you conclude with an iam. And one thing about that's interesting. These two lines, which essentially are saying the same thing, do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dying of the light. It's giving Each line is giving the same counsel to you to not be reconciled to the extinction of your being. Um, it wants you to fight and struggle and anguish over it. It's nothing to be reconciled to. It's appalling that we meet our end in the way that we do. It's just that they're kind of one's kind of an inversion of the other. The one says do not go gentle, the other one says rage, rage. So it tells you what not to do, the other one tells you what to do. And then that good night is the dying of the light in the third. In that good night of the first line is the dying of the light of the third line. And that's kind of an inversion too. It's talking about the light leaving rather than the night being present. And so in the way that they have that relation to each other, this inverted kind of but inverted form, but substantive similarity. That accentual rhythm that I just mentioned also has a kind of inverted quality. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but if not, it's a very happy accident because I think it works very well for this poem. What's going on with this poem? What's being said? So you would begin the "Do not go gentle into that good night" begins with an I am. That line ends with a spondee. The third line, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light," begins with a spondee and ends with an iamb. So I mentioned the pattern, the chiasmus pattern last week, and I'm going to mention it again, A, B, B, A. You kind of have that with these two lines. And as we get into more of the substance of the poem, um, that's a nice feature, a nice thing that it's doing. Um, but um, so there you are. You have this is not a narrative poem. This is someone, some imagined mind, reflecting on uh, this harshest of realities, the fact that we're going to die, and how appalling it is, and how it's to be lamented and not really accepted. um, and you get this kind of gallery of portraits of different kind of people, different men, different kind of men. He says. So he says men. We're gonna assume he means that like a synecdoche, and he means all people. So we'll help Dylan out on that one. But he says men. So wise men at their end know dark is right because their words had forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night. So you've got this wise man who understands uh, that the end is coming, um, but is frustrated, thwarted, um, um, appalled by the fact that um, he hasn't been able to have the effect on the world, I guess, that he would have hoped. His words had forked no lightning. Um, uh, uh, Good men crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Um, and then grave men near death who see with blinding sight blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Um, you have the portrait of these different sorts of men, representing types, I suppose, who each have their particular stock of knowledge, their particular approach to life, their philosophy, their individual temperaments, and any other kind of personal qualities, everything that makes them who they are. But they all come to the same end. It's all sort of absorbed and annihilated by the end that is waiting for everyone. And this is the conflict that's here is not, you might say, one of the intramural ones that we create as society develops to a certain level. This isn't like a man versus society sort of thing. This is someone standing, alone and kind of unshorn, ultimately, of all their personal qualities and of every kind of acquirement or individuating trait, every intellectual possession, every potency, every capacity for agency, um, and being helpless in the face of the lights out at the end. You know what? I meant to actually at the beginning. I'm gonna read a quote from Longinus because I think this is a kind of nice way to frame what's going on with this poem. Um, I've mentioned some things on the Sublime, and I may do one of these just on that, and talk about, you know, bring extracts from different texts and whatnot, and talk people who have talked about the Sublime, defined it, um, uh, and so that we can, distinguish what it really is from, the way a lot of people just kind of use the term sort of loosely. Anyway, so Longinus, one of those people. I know that sounds like a painful and embarrassing medical condition, but he was a person about whom not much is known really, except that he seems to have lived, he's a Greek, who lived in the first century AD, or CE, if you prefer, and wrote a very important book called On the Sublime. And in that book, there's this passage that I'll just read. Nature has judged man a creature of no mean or ignoble quality, but as if she were inviting us to some great gathering, she has called us into life, into the whole universe, there to be spectators of her games and eager competitors. And she therefore, from the first, breathed into our hearts an unconquerable passion for whatever is great and more divine than ourselves. Thus, the whole universe is not enough to satisfy the speculative intelligence of human thought. Our ideas often pass beyond the limits that confine us. So I think that's a lot of what's going on with this poem is the anguish and the tension between um, our reach, our mental reach, and our grasp. We, may think of Shakespeare in Hamlet, not the to be or not to be soliloquy, but the one where he's talking about what a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god. Um, our minds and our imaginations are miraculous, and they seem incredibly powerful, and they can encompass the whole world and the universe, and plumb any depth, and exceed any limit, and surmount any height. Um, but of course, they're housed in these bodies that can't transcend a damn thing, and you know that's one way of describing the kind of constitutive tension that we all live in. And these people in this sort of little gallery, the wise man, the good man, the wild man, the grave man, each has his pretension, each has his way of making his mark, um, and it will be just washed away uh, by the dying of the light at the end. And it's very interesting that, as I say, there was no, there, these aren't the more intramural conflicts we get into in society among people. This is a man standing before nature or before his fate, which exists here kind of as nature is kind of the trope for it. And um, the language just suggests that what the person wants is to make all these elements of nature to be, that are discussed here, to be sort of their playthings. His words are going to split a lightning bolt. The wise man, that's what he's going for. Um, the good man wants his frail deeds to dance in a green bay. Um, creating this image of a harmonious and hospitable natural environment, and that's to be celebrated, in which celebration is part of. Wild men, perhaps men of appetite, men of at, action, adventure, what have you, who would be of a mind to maybe to try to conquer nature. Caught and sang the sun in flight. So catching the sun, another trope that expresses seems to express this kind of um, desire by humans to conquer, control, understand, encompass nature, maybe become one with it. I mean, everything all these aspirations that these men are um, dream of, are expressed in terms of making some kind of, in which they're kind of inscribing themselves on some sort of natural element, some element of the natural world. The lightning is forked, the the green bay, the good deeds are dancing on the green bay. The wild man catches the sun, and then the grave men, near grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Um, so being near death, having some kind of um, and losing your sight, but having some kind of second sight at that moment, um, is the picture there. And then you come to this line that I find incredibly moving and really hits me when I get to it. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Um, his father. This is a condition, of course, that we inherit, and the, the father brings that idea into it, and he's on a sad height, which kind of encapsulates what's this tension too. Our minds and imaginations do bring us to great heights, but it's also a curse because we know things such as that we're going to die, and so forth. So it's definitely a mixed blessing. Um, and then I think that's kind of the central anguish of the poem. This tension between our mental reach and our actual grasp, and it's put in these. Welsh poetry is very old. It's uh, it goes the earliest poets I think are known of maybe the 6th century AD or CE if you prefer. Um, and If Robert Graves is to be believed, Robert Graves, a poet and author of novels, including I Claudius, he's probably best known for that. Really good memoir of his experience in World War I called Goodbye to All That. Anyway, he wrote this delightfully eccentric book, I think in the 40s, called The White Goddess. And he tries to make the case in that book, and I don't know whether this is accepted or not, but he tries to make the case that though we tend to credit the Provençal uh, poets, the troubadours in medieval France, um, as sort of die stamping Western poetry and giving us the forms we've inherited. Since then, they were definitely an influence on Dante, et cetera. That in fact they were influenced in turn by earlier Welsh poets. So he believes that Welsh poets deserve the credit for all that. Again, I can't vet that argument. I'm not qualified to do that. But anyway, it is very old. And when I read Dylan Thomas, I don't know if I should see it in terms of that tradition, or if he's trying to capture some of that urgency in his poems. But I I just feel that there's some kind of um, ancient pulse um, in this language and in his rhythms. He uses very elemental language. I think in here there's no real abstractions. A few here and there, but they're minor. He's talking about things in sometimes even kind of blunt language, and even lines that aren't seem a little rough hewn, aren't necessarily sinuous. I mean, I don't get the sense, even though everything here is absolutely deliberate, of course. My experience of the poem is not one where it appears to have been chiseled into some precise shape. Rather, it's more large, heavy pieces kind of being thrown together. Not thrown together in a pejorative sense, but I mean that are there's collisions in here and there's friction in here, and all that is is to his purpose in trying to talk about this kind of fundamental tension that we all at some time or another surely feel. Um, but it just seems very old to me, and just sort of redolent of the ancient world. And I think about when you read the ancient Greeks or anything from the ancient world or the early medieval world. You kind of have this way of speaking that's um, I'm not sure how to put it. I keep coming back to this word elemental. Um, it talks about basic things. It's kind of in the primary colors, and it talks about fundamental things, and nothing could be more fundamental here than a person, alone and facing the existential truths of existence. Um, so that's what I think is kind of going on with this poem. It's not a, it's as I say, one of his better known ones. Um, and I guess I will leave it there, and I will read it again. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Just a P.S. What I meant, I also meant to mention after I talked about the way that the repeating lines were in versions of each other in language, and also kind of were in the accentual rhythm. Um, I think that uh, that's a kind of a happy feature of this poem, also because it because the beginning and ending with the same I am and having the same thing in the middle, it's like an enclosed space, and I think that closure that you might feel there or perceive there is an appropriate uh, an appropriate um, suggestion of the finitude of human life, and how and so what you see in the poem is the description of all the different men who are trying to do different things, but then they're all claimed and 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 absorbed into the one of these two lines, um, as they recur, and it kind of annuls everything that they're doing. So I think that the accent, the way that the language was an inversion, the first line and third line, the language is kind of an inversion. The accentual rhythm is an inversion, and then the way that it seems like kind of an enclosed space, um, all help to all add weight to, I think, what he's trying to say about this fundamental struggle, between what we can imagine and what we aspire to, and what we are constrained to accept. Okay, well, thanks for listening. Bye.